Well, welcome everybody to the CRE Arena. Today we have Yonah Weiss, who does a lot of things. He is known as the Cost Seg King. He's a real estate investor. And let me get this right. You've saved your clients hundreds of millions of dollars in taxes through commercial real estate. Man, that's crazy. So, man, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Yeah, it's been a great ride. I appreciate you having me on the show, and happy to share whatever I can that will be valuable to the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. So to start us off, I mean, from where you're at today, and as we just mentioned, you're doing a lot of really cool and great things, and have had a ton of success. But what did it take to get here? So where did it start, and how did you get to where you are today?
Well, it's been a long ride, and I think it really, in a lot of ways, still at the beginning. But as far as career goes, I spent about 15 years as a teacher, and I was really immersed in study and teaching, and that's really been my passion. I'm a very religious person, and so I believe everything is really in the hand of God and kind of guiding me through life, where I should go, who I should meet, what should happen, opportunities that come our way, and I think we all have that. It's just a matter of whether we recognize it or not, or give it a certain name or a different name. But everyone kind of recognizes there's some sort of karma or universe or whatever you want to call it that's kind of guiding us. That being said, being a teacher was not the highest paying profession, as many know. And at a certain time, I really had to kind of make a choice, make a decision, and with a growing family that I had, to see what else I could do to bring in more income and help support the growing family. And real estate just kind of stumbled upon me, talking with several friends and acquaintances, that it was an industry or an area that I could get into, and with relatively little to no formal education, which I wasn't interested in going back to school at any given point at that time. And there's really no ceiling. Really, you could do anything, and you can accomplish really anything, and there's no ceiling to the amount of money you can make or the amount of connections you can make. So that, to me, was also, those two factors were most appealing to me. I got my start in brokering, and then doing some commercial mortgages, and doing a lot of different things, kind of just learning the industry, until I wound up doing cost segregation, meeting up with this company again, just through incredible opportunities, meeting people, connections, and just be willing to kind of take that risk and take that opportunity, leap of faith, if you will, not knowing really what lies ahead. But it's been about 5 years with this company, Madison Commercial Real Estate Services, and it's been great.
Man, that's awesome. So to go back really quick, and I just want to touch on this because I'll tell you why in a second, but so your teaching career, what did you teach? What ages? Was it, like traditional education, or, what would your teaching career look like?
Well, it was less traditional than many might assume. I started off really, even at the young age, I was always a teacher, a tutor of some kinds. I worked as a teacher's assistant in high school and in college as well. I worked at I really started off working at a high school. So that was when I was living in San Diego, and then really taught a lot of post-college college and post-college, like as a private tutor, as well as, just kind of higher education. So that was really my, the subjects were mostly like religious studies. So like I studied Hebrew and Talmud and the Bible and all kinds of things like that, which is really my real area of expertise. So the cost segregation is kind of my secondary area of expertise.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And the reason why I asked is because my dad's going to retire pretty soon, and it's always been his dream to be a teacher because, like you did, you kind of said, hey, it's not the highest paying career path, but he said it's always been something on his heart that he wants to do and accomplish. So yeah, we talked about it the other day, and he's talked about going to being a teacher, which is something after his career, and he's raised us and and made good money and to raise a family, but now he still wants to fulfill that dream that he has. So, but even we talked about the grades, and I asked him what grades are you thinking about going to teach, and the first time he told me, he said middle school. I think like middle school age, and I was like, Dad, and my dad's a quirky guy. He's a funny dude. My kids literally call him Funny Grandpa. Like he's just a funny dude. So in middle school, I told him, I was like, man, you go to public middle school here in Central Florida. I was like, they're gonna eat you up, dude. Like they're gonna eat you alive, bro. So yeah, I think he's thinking more like elementary age now. They're a little more they're a little more subtle, a little more reserved, and can laugh at his jokes and not, throw their lunch at him. So, um, so yeah, no, that's really cool. So, in to hear you say that, and getting into cost seg is, I mean, because when I first learned about cost seg studies and what they do and how they save people money, it was something that really blew my mind. And what
Yeah.
I see both like in your career, which is really encouraging, is the impact. I mean, it seems like you've always had the desire to really impact people and be an educator.
Yeah.
But whether that's through traditional education, biblical studies, cost seg studies, all of these things are something that impacts, whether it's somebody's faith or saving millions of dollars in taxes. Both of those are very impactful things. So that's something really cool to see. So, and for the people that, forgive me because I know this is probably the millionth time or more that you've explained it, but for the people that don't know what a cost seg study is, but say they have traditional knowledge about real estate, could you give us a rundown on it?
Absolutely. So cost segregation is a really weird name that the government gave for accelerating depreciation. So if you own real estate, any type of real estate besides for your primary residence, you are able to take a tax deduction called depreciation. And it doesn't mean something's going down in value, it's just a borrowed term based on the principle that things go down in value. So when you buy a property, you are able to take that as a tax write-off, an income tax deduction. And you do that over a 39-year period for commercial real estate or 27 and a half years for residential, including multifamily. So the IRS says, really, the whole building, right, the structural components, those are really the only components that are supposed to be depreciating over that longer 27 or 39-year period. Yeah. But there are components within the property and outside that actually depreciate faster. But if you can break it out with this engineering process of identifying the value of individual components, then you can actually take the value of those components as a tax deduction at a faster rate, over a 5-year, 7 or 15-year. And so it's really called component depreciation, but they gave it this weird name, again, of cost segregating the overall purchase price or cost of the building into these different buckets or different categories. So in a nutshell, just to kind of recap, it's a tax tool, really a cash flow mechanism that allows you to take bigger tax deductions in the earlier years of ownership.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And that's so I know it's incredibly popular in the multifamily space, but,
Yeah.
we use it in warehousing and industrial properties, really across all asset types. But, for you being the expert, have you seen that, certain asset classes benefit more from these type of studies?
Certainly, yeah. There are certainly certain types of asset classes that have more benefit because what we're doing is separating the structural components of a property from the personal property and from the land improvement. So those are really the two major categories. So personal property can be, anything like furniture, equipment, fixtures, appliances, window treatments, carpeting, flooring, anything like that. So if you think about, an apartment building or like an Airbnb, rental where you have a lot of amenities, a lot of those, appliances and furnishings and things like that have a lot more when you're comparing that with the percentage of the actual building structural costs. Yeah. And so that's really where we're seeing a lot of things. Nursing homes, another great example of a lot of more, equipment and personal property in that regard. Hotels as well, a lot of, FF&E. And on the flip side, you'll have certain properties that have very, very little. So like warehouses, industrial certain can have, but it's definitely on the lower end because, what's really inside? You have maybe some shelving, some definitely security systems and lighting and things like that. But essentially, you're just having, walls and structure.
That's a big box, a big metal or concrete box, and usually like 2% office space, which is where more of those components lie. So,
correct.
So no, that's really helpful. And could you talk a little bit more about the bonus depreciation? Because I know we're coming up on this is the last year to get the 100% bonus depreciation. Is that right? And then what does next year look like? The following years, and then also does this provision does the government go back and do they reinforce it to be 100%, or where do we go? And especially like what you think the current administration and how this is going to play out over the next couple of years with the whole 100% bonus depreciation starting to taper off.
Sure. So a lot of questions there. I'll try to unpack it all.
Yes,
But
sorry.
or essentially, when there was a big tax reform called the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act back in 2017, and what that instituted was something called 100% bonus depreciation. And what that means is, once you've done a cost segregation study on a piece of real estate and you have allocated certain components to a 5-year or 7 or 15-year lifespan, all of those components you can either take as a faster deduction or you can take as a lump sum in the first year. And that taking that lump sum in the first year is called 100% bonus depreciation. 2022, when they set it up in 2017, they gave it a finite timeline for that 100% bonus depreciation, and they started to phase it out. So 2022 will be the last year to take that full amount in the first year. Next year, 2023, is going to start going down by 20% each year. So it will be 80% bonus, which means, and just to reiterate, bonus doesn't mean anything extra, right? Again, like depreciation doesn't really mean it's going down in value. Bonus doesn't actually mean you're getting anything extra. Like, the Congress and IRS like to use these words, these terms that don't actually mean, and I guess maybe that's just ideologically, something to do with our society, that people give names for things that don't actually mean what they do. But
True.
I digress there. But there are, this year is going to be the last year. 2023, excuse me, going to go down to 80%. The remaining 20% will still be able to be accelerated depreciation over the 5 and 15-year periods, respectively. And then it's going to start phasing out. And to answer your question, will they reinstate it? I think that's on a lot of people's minds right now. We don't know. Obviously, whenever Congress does away with real estate tax incentives, there's the economy is affected, to badly. just to say bluntly, when Congress happens to be, and this is I've heard from many sources, happen to be the majority of people in the Senate and Congress are real estate investors themselves or have a vested interest in that. So it behooves them personally to make sure that these laws get passed to incentivize real estate with all these tax deductions. And it certainly has. I mean, anyone who has just any observation of what's happened over the past 5 years, the economy has had a huge boom. I think with a huge help, especially the real estate world. I think the 100% bonus depreciation law had a lot to do with that.
Yeah. No, I agree, and that's interesting to think about as far as like Congress goes, because I've thought about it from both sides. I was like, man, all the people like in Congress, in the House, they have a vested interest. I'm sure they own real estate, some more than others. But then I also thought about, the current administration is like, how much of this is trying to get back at the previous administration of like. I mean, the Donald was probably the biggest real estate. He was the biggest real estate investor, developer we've ever seen. Probably in the government, but definitely for president. So yeah, I thought about that, but not exactly, all the people in Congress as well. So.
And there's a lot of
There's a
lobbyists.
balance there, yeah.
There's a lot of lobbyists, and unfortunately, that's how how law gets passed in this country. There's a lot of lobbyists, a lot of people pushing from one direction or another to make sure this happens. And for better or for worse, I think anyone who is listening to this, who is a real estate professional or is a real estate investor, should reach out to their local representatives to make sure that this is something that actually comes back up, so we can reinstate the 100% bonus. I'm honest that that's something that you can have an effect on.
Yeah, and that's something, I'm personally convicted of that I, don't do enough of. And some of the older guys that are in my life, they, something will come through the office like, hey, tag your name on this, send a letter to this, state representative or whoever it is to say, hey, this is what we want. This is what we're thinking about as real estate professionals. That's something, I'm personally convicted of. I don't know if that's the old school way or what, but my generation, we don't really think that way. But I think you're exactly right that, that has an impact. And how do they, And how do they know unless they hear the people's voices if they're in those positions to serve the people?
For sure. And real estate has a huge ripple effect on. Think about it. Everyone lives somewhere.
Yeah.
Right? Everyone is in buildings, whether it's commercial or residential, all the time.
Yeah.
If people go outside occasionally, right? People like to do exercise or go outside, but essentially real estate is a huge integral component of the society at large.
Yeah, no, that's Gary Ralston, a mentor of mine, says that real estate is space for people, and no matter what asset class it is, real estate is pretty useless without people. So, no, totally makes sense. So to switch gears a little bit here, your investing career. Talk to me about when you started investing in deals. If you got in on the LP side first. I know you said you come from the brokerage world, so that's a very natural transition. You've had a lot of
Right.
experience with deals, but is that mainly strictly in the multifamily space, or are you doing more of like the syndication deals, or personally buying, or how are you? When did you start buying deals, and how's that journey been for you?
It's been a journey, and it continues. And I'm excited to see where it's going to go in the future. I've
Yeah.
learned a tremendous amount over the past 5 years, being deeply involved in this industry,
Yeah.
through the networking and just through the connections, and really being the conservation expert and working for the biggest national company that does conservation. I've had literally thousands of clients and people, some of the people most successful real estate people like I've ever met. And it's just been incredible to rub shoulders with those people and also get a kind of bird's eye view on what's happening in every market, every asset class,
Yeah.
from a kind of different perspective. So to get back to your question, I started out, my first investments were actually fix and flips I did with a partner. Not too successful. I definitely wouldn't go back to doing that. Not actively at all, ever. Maybe passively, or
Yeah.
on the lending side. But most recently, I'd say the past 3-4 years or so, I've almost entirely been as a limited partner, as a passive investor. With one exception, and where I've been, a general partner, or just a co-GP on a deal, helping to raise capital and do some other things. And that's actually one part of the business that I'm excited about moving into more actively, which is that kind of capital raising and being a general partner on not just multifamily, other types of deals. I've invested passively in multifamily, self-storage, mobile home parks, RV parks. And a few other things, and those are really the ones that I feel have the most, that I understand the most, first of all, and that I feel have like the most recession resistance and way to grow in that portfolio. So I'm excited about that, and really just open to opportunities to see
Yeah.
where what comes my way.
Yeah, no, that's really cool to hear you say, because I think over the last, I don't know, 5 to 7 years, the amount of people that have gotten into syndication has been, there's been more people in the past 5 years than there probably has in the past, since forever. The new structure of, finding a deal, raising the money for it. I think it's become, a very cool thing, for lack of a better term. Everybody's doing it, but for somebody like yourself, and I think it's very wise, for lack of a better term, is to help these investors and be an LP in deals, and then watch the people that are doing it well, and then getting into it in a point that maybe is not as attractive as it was in the past, 5-7 years. I've always said
Right.
that if you bought a multifamily deal in 2015, it didn't matter how much real estate expertise you had. In 2018, you're a genius. 2020, you're a genius of the appreciation of those type of assets, which that's been the most popular space for syndication. Has just it's been crazy. So yeah, to hear you say getting into it now, when I would say that, I don't want to say it's a different tone, now that interest rates have risen, and, the market is, showing some signs of cooling off, and what the Fed's, continues to do. So, but I mean, for people that are, and, to get to my point, I think in the past 5 to 7 years, there's been people that, have gotten it because it's really cool, and the money can be really good, and quick, easy, dirty type thing, where, it's hey, this is a very long game, so.
Yeah.
You starting to structure more deals and syndicate more deals now. Is there a specific asset class that you desire to specialize in, or are particularly interested in, or really want to go after?
Well, I mean, like you said, real estate is a long game. It's something that there's no such thing as get rich quick. I had a conversation with someone yesterday who reached out to me. They're like, they have some money, they want to invest, and they have a lot of debt, and they want to pay off student debt and all kinds of stuff. And it's like, there's no such thing as get rich quick, right? Learn something, pick one area that you like or that you're interested in, learn about it, find someone or some people that are really good at it. See if you can learn from them or mentor, take mentorship from them in some way, shape, or form, and grow. And just, once you master one thing, you can kind of branch out to do more. So those previous asset classes that I mentioned, self-storage, mobile home parks, those are two that really I have. Mobile home parks even more so, because affordable housing is probably one of the biggest issues right now in America. And in terms of real estate, and there's just a huge lack of it. And mobile home parks or mobile home communities, however you want to call it, especially newer developed ones that are pretty similar in a lot of ways to the way that they're being developed, and are very similar to regular single families, just a lot cheaper and a lot more affordable.
Yeah.
And so that's something that I wouldn't say passionate about, but definitely much more interested in than other types of asset classes.
Yeah, and I love what you said about getting good at something. I think that's something that the younger generation overlooks, and the overnight millionaire is really toxic amongst our young people in our society, because that's one thing I've said before, and I like to keep in mind and share with other young people, is that oftentimes, unfortunately, you'll be paid less than you're worth, but you'll never be paid more than you're worth. So whoever is paying you, it's very, very rare that you're going to be paid more than you're worth. So, heavily focus on the value that you bring to the marketplace, because, the income is directly related with, how much value you bring to the market. So, no, I think that's really smart, and a really good point that we can't harp on enough to people getting into the business and playing the long game. So, well, I want to switch gears again. There's a few things, that, like I said, you've done really well, and I want to pick your brain about, and I think you provide a great amount of value to the audience. So LinkedIn, social media, and then also, podcasting. So I assume, did LinkedIn, social media come before podcasting? Is that right?
It did. In fact, I was introduced to my first podcast ever as a guest, or really even to listen to, through LinkedIn, about 5 years ago. And I'd never really heard a podcast before in terms of like actually listening to content or listening to shows or anything like that. But yeah, LinkedIn, it became, kind of a topic, and people were mentioning it. I actually came across Bigger Pockets at that time. That was probably the first podcast I'd ever come across. Yeah. And then, someone posting about it on LinkedIn, and me commenting, and then listening to a couple and learn. I found a great resource to listen and to learn. And then someone reached out to me and was like, "Hey, I have this podcast. Would love for you to come be a guest on." Yeah. And it really snowballed from there. And because I was using LinkedIn as a social media platform to grow my personal brand and to help grow the business, it was a perfect, kind of fertile ground, especially in the commercial real estate space at the time. And it still is to this day, but even more so back then, that, anyone who had a podcast or was starting a podcast in the real estate space saw me posting that I was a guest on this podcast. And that's what I would do. I would take a picture or or share the episode, and people would see that and like, wow, I'm looking for a guest to speak about this topic. Cost segregation is really interesting. And that's what I just did over and over and over again to this point, over 400 podcast guest appearances to this point.
Wow. No, that's awesome. And, that's, you explained it pretty well. So you were focused on, when getting on LinkedIn, I think we all start on LinkedIn for business purposes, whether it's like, a lot of people like for a recruiting purpose or to find jobs or, network and make connections. But, for you, was it the personal brand at first? Like that was your first, or, when did you start taking personal brand seriously, on social media?
So it was pretty soon after I found LinkedIn. So I stumbled upon it. I mean, I had a LinkedIn account for probably like, close to 10 years before I actually opened it. And, obviously had a profile, had, those connections that you knew from college or whatever. Yeah. But as seeing it as a social media platform that it became about 5 years ago when Microsoft acquired it and it started to kind of rival Facebook in that way, I was seeing for the first time, instead of just people sharing articles or people posting, job postings and stuff like that, it's actually people sharing videos or, short form, copy and text, and pictures, whatever it is, of inspiration, of educational things, just short form content, which I was like, wow, this is really interesting. And seeing people doing this as a way to create a personal brand or enforce a personal brand. That's where I first came across Gary Vaynerchuk, Gary V, who is a huge, digital marketing, guru, and really does it well. I came across him and read a couple of his books and really was like blown away by the opportunity that was there if you just kind of doubled down and focused on that. So that's exactly what I did. I just, doubled down and focused on adding value, and just growing that brand, kind of focusing and niching down to find whatever that niche. And for me, the cost segregation was a perfect niche because literally nobody was talking about it.
Yeah.
Literally at the time, like I created that, the hashtags, when hashtags became a thing on LinkedIn. Now on other social it was a big thing, but there's literally zero followers, zero posts that had that hashtag. And so I started using it, talking about depreciation, bonus depreciation, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And I wouldn't say I'm the only one who is, who has contributed to that, but at the time, there was literally nobody was talking about it.
Yeah, and that's funny, like to think about why is that, and you think, people love saving money. It's like, okay, we love saving money and, would do just about anything to not, give more money to Uncle Sam. But, not a lot of people like reading tax codes. So, and understanding it. So to have somebody that is, that has a personal brand of education and understanding and, also to be the expert and then also provide those services, like does seem like the perfect storm of opportunities. So, and you've done an incredible job on LinkedIn, and obviously that's how this happened. So, over 400 podcasts later, you said still using LinkedIn to be seen and be on podcasts. So,
absolutely,
I think that's. Yeah, I think that's really smart. So your own personal podcast, how long after did you start that, from, hey, I'm taking personal brand really seriously on LinkedIn, and then, hey, it's time for me to, start a podcast?
When I really got interested in kind of investing in real estate more, and I was, trying to make this transition. Should I do it? Should I go more full time into real estate investing? Should I stick with this? I read Joe Fairless's book, the best ever, apartment syndication book, I think it's called, and like a textbook, right? And it's just incredible. And he talks a lot about, personal branding, talks a lot about building a thought leadership platform, and podcasting is obviously a big thing. And basically every single one of his students started a podcast, and so it was just everyone was starting a podcast, and I was being a guest on all these, and I loved it. And I love the interactions. I enjoy having conversations, but I'm also curious and also want to learn as well. And I'm like, hey, why don't I start my own? And it literally took me about a year from when I thought about starting a podcast till I actually launched the Weiss Advice podcast, what it is today, which it's already 2.5 years running. But yeah, it took some time until I was like, maybe I should do that. And really the point of it, more than anything, I've used it as just a way to, a lot of ways to give back. It's a kind of a fun project for me. We're not talking about specific topics per se, like a lot of other podcasts do. I like just have it more conversational, just get to know people. Similar to what this is here. This is a really great kind of forum that you have here, and I use it in a very similar way. And most of the guests on my show, I'd say 90% plus of the guests on my show thus far, and we're coming up on 300 episodes now, are clients of mine that that use Cost Segregation, and I want to give back to them in a certain way, and to give them a platform and kind of allow people to get to know them. And so that's one of the main reasons why I have it as well.
Yeah, and that was, so yeah, the most beneficial thing I've learned, and this is probably episode number 10 or so, is that I love hearing people get good feedback from it. It's like, hey, I listened to this episode, man, really loved hearing about this, and that was really helpful. Thank you so much. That was awesome. So helping other people is definitely at the number one with the podcast, right. But a close second is the intentionality of getting to know people better. So with you being in the Northeast, me being down in Central Florida, it's like, is there another, without this podcast, say we both didn't have podcasts, is there another time that we're going to sit down for 30, 40 minutes and just like, connect like that and get to know each other in depth? Probably not. So, and that's been the, the same with a lot of the guests that I've had on the show. So it's something that, a relationship building tool and getting to know people better, and then turn into business. Only 10 episodes in, I really haven't turned it into too much business, but we're working on it. So no, that's great. And for your guests for your podcast, who you choose to have on the show and why? Do you have do you do a top 100, or how do you organize, select, or just, hey, that guy looks interesting, let me see if they can get on a podcast, or how do you be more strategic about hey, what guests do I want to have on the show, and how do you get them to get on the show?
So for me, like I said, it's pretty easy because just of the business that I have and the network that I have. I want to interview people who I interact with anyway. So I have chosen people that I know already. And I want to just have another great conversation with them and give them a platform to kind of share their journey and their story and what they're working on with the world. So like I said, 90% of the people I've had on the show are clients of mine, people that have used my services and that I know beforehand. Like I've had conversations with them, I've met them. And so that to me is easy. I prefer doing that than trying to get some famous guests or some other people. I have had that, and the funny thing is, I think every podcaster has this vision in their head, if I have this really, really super popular Instagram influencer on my show, they're gonna spread it and share the episode with their audience, and then I'm gonna get million subscribers. The truth is, number one, I think every single podcaster has that kind of dream or whatever you want to call it, and to be honest, I've had a couple of those guests, and number one, they didn't share it at all.
Yeah.
Number two, even if they did, their audience, if I did get subscribers from them, wouldn't necessarily be my target audience anyways. And so it's just vanity metric. What are you really trying to get after there? It's really kind of niching and targeting down, targeting who your audience is, and so for me, it's easy to pick the guests. I get, and I'm sure you will start to get as well as you start to publish this. I get at least 2 or 3 emails a day from different companies or different people that their job is to book people on podcasts, or they try to match people, guests with hosts and stuff like that.
That's interesting.
And, and I literally ignore all of them, just because I'm really not interested. I'm interested in having the people that I actually know, and because there's something else that really bothers me. Last week, and I don't know when this is going to be airing, but last week it came out a story about a certain individual who was a guest on the Bigger Pockets podcast and had been indicted for fraud, and big story in the news. And he'd been on dozens of podcasts. And to me, obviously, it's hard to know. It's hard to know who's going to be your guest, right? But I really feel I don't want to be promoting someone through my podcast that I personally don't know or don't trust. Because you have to have that. Even if I do want to interview someone that I've never spoken to before, I always try to have a quick call with them beforehand and just kind of have my gut tell me, is this someone that I actually want to promote, and look into their background a little bit more. So that's another factor that to me I take into consideration when I'm having guests on my show. And the hard part really is that because I have this huge network and literally have thousands of clients, it's very hard to choose who should I have, right? And so I'll put out occasionally just a blast out there to some clients, I'd love to have you a guest on my show, and then I'll just get booked up for months at a time, and then I'm good to go.
Yeah. No, that's really cool. And I think protecting the platform is key. And then also, that's one thing I've done so far, just getting started, is I think in my head of, who's the audience and how can we provide the most value to them.
Right.
And I certainly think that's something you've done here today. So really appreciate it, man. Before we go, so what is something other than, more deals, what is something you're working on right now or coming up in the new year that you're really excited about and want to tell the people more about?
Well, more deals for sure is always the case. 2 things that I'm really excited about, which have one to do with the other very much. One is kind of bringing on more team members to help me personally with just, the who, not how, the taking,
Yeah.
offloading stuff from my plate that, that I don't need to be putting my energy in. And then the second thing, which really has a lot to do with the first, is going more heavily into the investment side, on the general partner side, on the capital raising side. And that's, I have an opportunity right now that's in the works, hasn't been finalized yet, but with a really amazing sponsor, amazing team that hopefully it will work out, and I'll be partnering with them in Q1 to be raising a big fund. So
Man,
that's exciting.
that's awesome, man. That's really good to hear. And I totally hear that. I understand that, and I totally get that. As hey, bringing on people on the team to help you, handle everything that the business, that it takes to run the business, and then using your skills and your time and energy to work on those bigger and better tasks and items that only you can take on. So I definitely understand that, and kind of doing the same thing in my own business. So. Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much. And if anybody has any questions on Cost Seg, or is wanting to do a Cost Seg study, please reach out to Yonah. You can find him on LinkedIn, but also where else can they find you?
I'm really on all the socials at this point, except for TikTok. But yeah, LinkedIn is definitely the one I'm most active on. You can also go to yonahweiss.com.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much, Yonah, and everybody have a great day.